The war between Ukraine and Russia has entered yet another dangerous phase, with new reports of explosions near one of the most sensitive and risky locations in the entire conflict, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. The United Nations nuclear watchdog has confirmed that blasts were detected near the facility over the weekend, raising fears once again about the potential for a nuclear disaster in the heart of Europe. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is the largest in Europe and one of the 10 biggest in the world. It has been under Russian control since the early months of the war, but it continues to be operated by Ukrainian staff under extremely difficult conditions. Since the war began, the plant has been caught in the crossfire multiple times, with both sides accusing each other of shelling the surrounding areas. Every time fighting flares near the plant, the risk of an accident increases, sparking alarm internationally. The latest explosions come at a time when tensions are already high. According to the UN Nuclear Agency, their monitoring systems confirmed seismic and acoustic events consistent with explosions close to the plant. While the reactors themselves do not appear to have been damaged, any fighting so close to a nuclear facility carries huge risks. Damage to cooling systems, power lines, or spent fuel storage could lead to dangerous releases of radiation. Ukraine and Russia immediately traded accusations after the news broke. Ukrainian officials accused Russian forces of staging provocations near the plant to intimidate Ukraine and its allies. Russia, in turn, claimed Ukraine was responsible for the blasts, saying Kyiv's forces were targeting the area in an attempt to create panic and pressure Russia into withdrawing. These mutual accusations have become a pattern throughout the war, making it difficult for independent observers to determine the truth. The concern is not limited to Ukraine and Russia alone. European governments already dealing with the consequences of war, including energy shortages, refugee flows, and economic strain, fear that a nuclear accident could have devastating consequences for the entire continent. Memories of the Chernobyl disaster in 1986 remain fresh in the region, and even a smaller-scale incident could contaminate land and water for decades at the same time. Another significant development has been reported in Russia itself. In the southern city of Sochi, a major oil refinery caught fire after what Russian officials say may have been a Ukrainian drone strike. The fire was described as large and dangerous, though local authorities claimed it was quickly brought under control. Sochi is a city better known for hosting the Winter Olympics in 2014. Not for being a target in wartime, but as the conflict drags on, more parts of Russia are feeling its direct impact. Oil refineries are a critical part of Russia's economy and military capability. Damaging them not only disrupts civilian fuel supplies, but can also hinder the movement of military vehicles, planes, and ships. If Ukraine was indeed behind the strike, it shows a continued willingness to take the war deep into Russian territory, hitting strategic targets far from the front lines. These two incidents, explosions near a nuclear plant and a fire at an oil refinery, highlight the dangerous escalation taking place. They also reveal how the war has moved beyond the traditional battlefield, affecting energy infrastructure that is vital to both sides. For Ukraine, targeting Russian energy assets could weaken Russia's war effort and send a signal that nowhere inside Russia is completely safe from retaliation. For Russia, holding control over a nuclear plant in occupied territory is both a bargaining chip and a shield. But it is also a potential liability if something goes wrong. Internationally, the United Nations, NATO, Kyiv, and the European Union have all called for restraint, especially around nuclear facilities. The UN nuclear watchdog has repeatedly urged both sides to agree on a safety zone around the Zaporizhzhia plant, free from military operations, but so far those calls have not been successful. Each side accuses the other of using the plant as cover, knowing the other will hesitate to strike directly at it. The risk extends beyond the immediate conflict zone. A serious incident at Zaporizhzhia could force mass evacuations in Ukraine, Russia, and neighboring countries. It could contaminate rivers that flow into the Black Sea, affecting millions of people's water supply. It could even require international emergency response efforts, further straining global resources already stretched by other crises. Meanwhile, inside Ukraine, the fighting continues along multiple fronts. Russian forces have intensified their operations in the east and south, trying to gain ground before the onset of harsher weather in autumn. Ukrainian forces are carrying out counterattacks, often using drones, precision artillery, and sabotage teams to hit Russian positions and supply lines. The war remains highly dynamic, with gains and losses on both sides. On the Russian side, domestic attitudes toward the war are being shaped by these kinds of incidents. Fires, explosions, and strikes inside Russian territory challenge the government's narrative that the conflict is a distant special military operation with little impact on everyday life. Each attack inside Russia risks eroding public confidence and increases pressure on the government to respond forcefully. For ordinary people in both countries, the situation is exhausting. Ukrainians live under constant threat from missile and drone strikes, while Russians in border regions and now even cities like Sochi are beginning to experience similar fears. The humanitarian toll keeps rising. Millions displaced, thousands killed or wounded, and countless more living in uncertainty about the future. The global community is watching closely. The U.S. and European allies continue to supply Ukraine with weapons, intelligence, and financial aid, while Russia strengthens its ties with countries like China, Iran, and North Korea for military and economic support. Each side is digging in for what looks increasingly like a long war. What makes the latest developments so alarming is how they combine two of the most dangerous elements of modern warfare: attacks on nuclear facilities and strikes against critical energy infrastructure. Either of these alone would be cause for serious concern. Together, they point to a war that is willing to cross almost any line as calls for peace talks persist. The reality is that trust between Ukraine and Russia is at its lowest point in decades. Negotiations are unlikely to succeed unless both sides see a strategic advantage in stopping the fighting, and, at the moment, both believe they can still improve their position through continued military action. The explosions near Zaporizhzhia and the refinery fire in Sochi are a stark reminder that this war is far from over, and that its consequences could easily grow beyond the borders of Ukraine and Russia. They are also a warning to the world that the risks of escalation, intentional or accidental, remain dangerously high in the days and weeks to come. Much will depend on how both sides choose to respond. Will they double down, increasing the pace and reach of their attacks? Or will these incidents serve as a wake-up call that certain targets should be off-limits? The answer to that question could